Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sydney Edwards, and I'm a fourth-year communication and political science double major here at SFU. Sparked by current political issues and through my interest in Indigenous political and cultural movements, public policy, and government accountability practices, I've developed a rhetorical analysis of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's September 30th, 2021 controversial Tofino trip and his following apology. In order to fully understand the significance of my article's topic, I've created a timeline so we can pinpoint the major events that will be analyzed in my paper. The first significant date of this event is June 2nd, 2015, as on this day, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada established the 94 calls to action to address the legacy of residential schools and advance the process of reconciliation among Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada. Fast forward to over 5 years later, on September 29th, 2020. In response to call to action number 80, the federal government established Bill C-5 to create a statutory holiday called the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This day is recognized to honor survivors of residential schools, their families, and communities, and to ensure the public commemoration of the dark history and legacy of residential school system. On June 3rd, 2021, Parliament fast-tracked this bill due to the findings of the remains of 215 Indigenous children at the site of the former Kamloops Residential School on May 27, 2021. The royal assent of Bill C-5 officially created the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, also known as the NDTR, to take place every September 30th. Following the creation of the NDTR on June 3rd, Trudeau had several press releases and speeches to actively address how the federal government will stay committed to honor Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities in Canada. The night before the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, on September 29th, the federal government held an evening ceremony on Parliament Hill to mark the first NDTR, which Trudeau did attend. The last 2 points on my timeline are the main events that have been discussed and analyzed in my article. September 30th to October 6th, Trudeau's trip on the first NDTR and his initial apology. Before explaining how Trudeau's Tofino trip is analyzed as rhetoric and how his October 6th apology is classified as a pseudo or fake apology, I will first explain my methodology for the paper and the key terms used in my article. First, what is rhetoric? Modern academic understandings of rhetoric can be broadly defined as written or spoken communication, going beyond the simple perception of rhetoric as the art of persuasion. Rhetoric is a set of methods people use to identify with each other, which encourages communication to share many different perspectives. A rhetorical analysis takes a discoursal artifact, a book, speech, press release, or apology, and analyzes and evaluates how and why the artifact is used by the speaker or rhetor to inform, convince, entertain, or persuade the given audience. In the first section of my article, I use McCarroll's critical rhetoric theory, mainly the critique of domination, to conduct a rhetorical critique on the ideologies of a group or leader, Prime Minister Trudeau, and how it is used to legitimize the interests of the ruling class and therefore identify the involved power relationships in society. In the second part of my paper, I approach Trudeau's apology through the framework of the rhetoric of atonement. Through this theory, Trudeau's apology can be dissected and analyzed to determine if and how rhetors can expressively take responsibility for their actions and then seek public forgiveness. There are 3 steps in the rhetoric of atonement which will be used to determine if Trudeau's apology is legitimate, which will be explained later on in this presentation. September 30th, 2021 marked the first statutory holiday of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. On that same day, Prime Minister Trudeau decided to take a personal holiday to Tofino, British Columbia. As the office of the Prime Minister of Canada holds significant symbolic and actual power over the people of Canada, this forms the basis of the rhetorical critique of my paper. Before the Tofino trip, Trudeau made 2 significant press releases that set expectations and outlined his supposed ideologies concerning Indigenous rights and how the federal government holds value about the importance of Indigenous peoples in Canada. McCarroll's critical rhetoric theory was used to analyze and determine that Trudeau holds great knowledge about the importance of Indigenous peoples in Canada and how crucial it is to demonstrate respect based on these press releases. Despite the promising statements from the office of the Prime Minister, Trudeau's actions did not follow his words. Before September 30th, Trudeau was offered 2 invitations by the Tk'emlúps Titsewet'emek First Nation in Kamloops to commemorate and honor the Indigenous children found at unmarked graves at the hands of the Canadian federal government, and for a planned event to honor the first NDTR. Other than the first and only official announcement given by the Prime Minister about the initial event, Trudeau did not extend any personal sympathies to the community on the day and did not respond to either invitation, but rather instead flew over Kamloops to his private Tofino vacation. Studies have noted that most frequently, the actions of the rhetor truly reflect their ideologies. Therefore, Trudeau's Tofino trip accurately represents his ideology and values about the NDTR, rather than his written press releases stating otherwise. Trudeau clearly communicated to Canada that this day is a day to take off and take a personal vacation across the country. As a consequence of the enormous public criticism about his decision to take a personal vacation on the first NDTR, on October 6, 2021, Trudeau issued an apology at the end of a late morning press conference about the announcements of new travel measures for unvaccinated Canadians. At the beginning of the short apology, lasting about 1 minute total, Trudeau immediately states that traveling on the 30th was a mistake and I regret it. He then states that many of the exact phrases found in his press releases in this apology about the significance of the NDTR and what it should mean to Canadians. At the end of the apology, Trudeau states that there's a lot of work for us all to do, and I'm committed to doing it, which is a sidestep away from admitting his wrongdoings and placing it as a wrongdoings to the people of Canada. Typically, an apology is made to only and explicitly restore the audience's view of the rhetor by various strategies. In contrast, rhetoric of atonement employs tactics that admit to the behavior which contributes to long-term image restoration. In order to achieve true atonement, the individual must admit responsibility for their actions, seek forgiveness, and show that they are truly regretful of their actions. This theory was used to determine if Trudeau seek forgiveness for his choice to vacation in Tofino on such a significant day, and if he legitimately regrets his decision. As the foundation to determine if Trudeau is truly regretful of his decision to take a personal vacation on the NDTR, the rhetoric of atonement uses 3 terms as steps to establish the criteria for true atonement. The term repentance is when the rhetor confesses their wrongdoings and explicitly asks for forgiveness. Trudeau merely stated that he had regrets about his choices, but did not mention any sort of anguish, guilt, or apparent shame about what he did. The understanding and demonstration of true repentance cannot be determined by one person only. Feedback from the audience, which in this situation is the public, is necessary to determine true genuineness. Several prominent figures in Canadian society, like Cindy Blackstock and Roseanne Archibald, called Trudeau's statements hollow, and that the apology would only be considered genuine if Trudeau could show future actions to back up his empty claims. Many Indigenous and non-Indigenous people throughout Canada hold similar opinions, which further confirms Trudeau's disingenuous apology. This truly shows that he has failed the repentance portion of atonement. The prayer component of atonement focuses on the individual and their personal reflection on their wrongdoings. As Trudeau has failed repentance, it would be difficult for him to argue that he has reflected on his wrongdoings as in prayer. If the component of prayer were successful, the public would identify a changed attitude along with the understanding that Trudeau is honestly regretful of his decision to travel to Tofino. Lastly, charity is identified when the rhetor engages in some reparation for their wrongdoings to show factual evidence that they regret their choices. The genuine actions of charity cannot be carried out by Trudeau to mend his situation due to the lack of understanding and remorse of his actions. Ultimately, due to the failed levels of atonement, Trudeau's apology is certainly classified as a pseudo-apology. It is shallow, poorly received, and shows that Trudeau does not truly take responsibility for his actions. There is zero ownership of his wrongdoings, which is clearly communicated to Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities across Canada and to the public. The significant suggestion my article can present is most importantly, Trudeau needs to issue a new apology. Trudeau must approach and diligently apply all the components of the rhetoric of atonement to his apology while showing concrete courses of action that can explicitly be identified by his legitimate actions rather than in press statements. In conclusion, based on the rhetorical analysis of Trudeau's press releases, the infamous Tofino trip, and the following apology, my paper concludes that Trudeau's actions and failed atonement signify to Indigenous peoples in Canada that the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is just another holiday, a sentiment that is truly appalling from the leader of Canada. This issue does not only bear significance to us as academics, but should be a critical point of reflection for all citizens and residents in Canada. Our government is there as our representation and to reflect our values. As such, it is necessary to hold our elected officials accountable for their actions and hold them to the highest of standards. As Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say." Thank you.